You're listening to Thursday Night Tailgate, where NFL legends live on, with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lasseri. Available on TuneIn and Podbean. Now back to Chris and Bob.
Just listen.
And now joining us on the Kyvan Foods guest line is Randy Grimes. Let me give you some background on Randy. He's from Tyler, Texas, played his college ball at Baylor, where he helped them to win the 1980 Southwest Conference Championship, along with guys on that team like Mike Singletary. And as a Steeler fan, I always remember running back Walter Abercrombie. He was a second-round draft pick, the 45th overall selection in 1983 by the Tampa Bay Bucs. He played center in the league from 83 to 1992, all in Tampa. And we are excited that Randy is with us tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Randy, Chris and Bob here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me. I just heard how insightful the last Randy was, so I'm not sure if I can follow that.
I'm sure you can.
You'll be fine.
So, Randy, I want to start our time with you tonight by going back to your time in college at Baylor. Being from Texas, which is, a hotbed of high school football, how were guys like Coach Bill Lane able to convince you to go there versus Texas or A&M or SMU or any of the other places in and around the Texas area? How did Baylor get you?
Hey, he let me fly the plane when they came and picked me up for a recruiting trip. That's all it took. Hey, and also though, keep in mind, I come from a rich Southern Baptist background, and already had a sister at Baylor, so I mean there was a lot of things working in Baylor's favor. But you can't say enough about Coach Taff and the staff that he had at that time, and we were destined for greatness, some of those teams. And you were talking about Walter Abercrombie, but don't forget about Frank Pollard and Greg Hawthorne. They were in those Pittsburgh backfields too.
That's right.
And from Baylor.
So, Randy, I saw, some of the, like I said, guys that you also had on those teams, and then, looking, for the guys that graduated with you and then you played against in the NFL. And boy, I got to wonder, like I say, Mike Singletary was a part of that team. And then when you get to the NFL, now all of a sudden you're literally bumping heads with Mike Singletary twice a year, because back then the Bucs and the Bears were in the same division, so you're playing them twice a year. What was it like facing Mike Singletary essentially over the course of your career?
Pretty much. Mike Singletary broke 4 helmets in college, and all 4 of them were in practice against me. So you can imagine the head trauma that Randy Grimes has today.
Wow.
All before I left Baylor. But you know what? I learned a lot about playing center from Mike Singletary, being such a great linebacker, and then having to face him every year for pretty much my entire career at a different level, where guys were so big and strong and fast. Because of Mike Singletary in college, I grew up a lot, and I was ready for that next level because it wasn't a lot different. When I got to the pros, based on the guys that I played with at Baylor and the kind of talent that we had, in those early 80s teams.
And Randy, I saw an interview that you did about 6 years ago, and you're telling a story about how Randy White was your welcome to the NFL moment during the Hall of Fame game that you played against the Cowboys. Do you mind sharing that story?
Well, I remember I had to start at left guard, and I'm a center. I've always been a center. But my first start, my rookie year, was against Randy White. And, here's somebody that I'd been watching on television for years, through high school, through Baylor. And here I was having to line up against him. And not only that, try to keep him off our quarterback. And, I can remember one time him just completely knocking me down on the ground, like right off the bat, one of the first plays of the game. And I can remember him reaching his hand down to pick me up, which was unusual in the first place. And I remember saying, "Thank you, sir." And I bet I called him sir 3 or 4 times during the course of the game. But later we were walking through the Hall of Fame, touring the facility as a team, and every year they have the sports writers submit their pictures from the year before, and they place the best pictures in the Hall of Fame. And I can't tell you how big these pictures are. They're like 8 feet by 10 feet tall, these individual pictures on this wall. And I walk in, I've got the whole team with me, and there's a picture from the game of Randy White reaching over me, grabbing the quarterback, and I'm all crumpled on the ground. And it was just, it was my first humiliation in the NFL. Not the last, but my first.
Bob, questions for Randy?
Great to speak with you, Randy. I want to talk about the '83 draft, because when we think about that, that was the quarterback draft, Randy. The Elways
Right.
and of course Hall of Famers in that draft were guys like Eric Dickerson, of course Jim Kelly, and we can go on and on. But you, a second-round draft pick, I think there was only 10 offensive linemen picked ahead of you. What were your expectations that day going into the draft, Randy? Bring us through that day.
I didn't really have any expectations. I had no idea where I was going to be drafted. I knew that I was going to be somewhere in the first half. And when I say first half, I mean the first 6 rounds. But, I'd had some great combines. I'd had a great senior year. Whether or not it was a good enough year or whether or not they thought Baylor's offense was an NFL-style offense or not, I'd had some great combines. And, I was running good. I was lifting good. I was doing everything right. I was having good pro days when they came around. And, my stock really elevated even so after the season. But I didn't have any expectations of where I was going to go. And to be honest, guys, I didn't care. I just wanted a shot. And had I been the first player selected or the last player selected, it would have been fine with me at that time, because I just wanted to get in the league and I just wanted to at least give it a shot. And, getting drafted by Tampa Bay, they had just come off a playoff year. It was a strike-shortened year, but it was a playoff year. And here I was, a kid from East Texas, going to a beachside town, that had just come off the playoffs. You couldn't have picked a better place for me to go then. And I was excited to be going to Tampa. And little did I know what the next decade was going to bring. But still, looking back, I have no regrets. I love the town. I love the team. I love the time I was there. It was a great place to raise a family and start my life. And even though it was a revolving door for that decade with coaches and offensive line coaches and players, quarterbacks, everybody, one thing that was consistent was my ability to start at center, and I have no regrets.
And playing the position of center, Randy, these days we see centers, we get the close-ups of the offensive line. They're the quarterback of that offensive line. It's like they're pointing, they're calling, they're talking, et cetera. Did you have to do a lot of that under John McKay's system?
Not as much under McKay as maybe we started doing under Perkins and Williamson and Coach Wyche. There's basic calls that happen on every play. You have to identify people's strengths and weaknesses, especially passes and when you're doing hinge protections and things like that. So, you're making your basic calls all the time. But, the complicated audible system didn't really start with us till probably after the McKay era. And, but you know what? It becomes part of what you do. It's a natural reflex when you get up to the line of scrimmage, and you don't think anything of it. You just kind of do it.
Randy, we've had the privilege of having Gay Culverhouse on the show several times over the last few months, and you played for her father, Hugh, who owned the Bucs for many years. Talk about your relationship with the Culverhouse family.
Oh, I love Gay. I love what she's doing. She cares a lot about her players. And for somebody who is not involved with the team anymore, for her to continue to do what she does, and that's advocate for retired players, I can't say enough about Gay and my relationship with her. I love her and what she's doing for us. And I just, she's an icon as far as I'm concerned with retired players and what she's been able to pull off. And I just can't thank her enough. I thank her all the time. I'll just text her out of the blue sometimes and just say thank you, because there's not enough of those people out there that understand what these guys went through and what they're still going through. And I'm talking about pre-93 guys, not that guys after 93 aren't going through that, but the pre-93 guys are leaving the game without the benefits of the guys after 93. And, that's the guys that she's out there advocating for. And, I can't thank her enough for that.
And Randy, as you talk about, guys leaving the game, and we've talked to so many of your peers, former players who struggled once, they retired, either on their own when they stepped away from the game, or the game sort of retired them because they got released and the phone just didn't ring anymore. And football was, all they know, right? From the time that, you guys are little kids playing in Pop Warner to, your time through the NFL. Your last season, Sam Wyche was the head coach of the Bucs. How did he let you know that your time with the Bucs was over?
Well, and I tell the story all the time because it's part of the journey that I was in at the time and what lasted for the next 20 years. But I remember standing at my locker and Sam coming up behind me. The season was over, and he just kind of put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Randy, we won't be needing your services next year." And, I couldn't believe that. I don't know how I thought it was going to end, but I didn't think it was going to end like that. After 10 years, after 5 head coaches and 6 different offensive line coaches, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that I had left on that field in Tampa, I guess I didn't know what to expect on the end. I guess I was just going to play the game forever. That I was going to be able to leave on my own terms, and I can just remember thinking, it's not like I wanted a highway named after me or them to have a parade, but I guess I just never thought it would be like that, where he just walked up and said, "We just won't be needing your services." And, I understand NFL's a business, and I understand that there wasn't a lot of loyalty with Coach Wyche and me. So, there was no hard feelings. I guess I just didn't understand that was it. And, I'd been pretty beaten up that last year, and I knew that I probably didn't have a shot anywhere else. And I can just remember raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door, very unceremoniously. And again, it's not like I expected anything great to happen or anything, but I just didn't think it would end like that. And I threw that trash bag in the trunk of my car and I drove away, and that was it. Football was over. And yeah, you're right. When you don't have that identity anymore, when you don't have that sense of who you are, you really start to struggle. And there's no way to prepare for it. You could work other jobs in the off season. You can have all the degrees in the world. But when you're doing football 24/7 for 4 years of college and then 10 years of NFL, you're never prepared for that day. And yeah, you sit around for a couple of years twiddling your thumbs. Very few of us guys go straight into broadcasting or the media, or did we even have those channels available to us back then. But I think guys really struggle when it's over, just trying to figure out who they are. Where do they get their sense of self-worth now, and what's their identity? Even now, people still come up to me and think of me as a football player, but it's been, 25, 26 years ago. And so when you don't have that identity and you're not running out between those bleachers and under those lights. And people ask me all the time, what do I miss about the game? And I don't miss the game as much as I do the locker room. And that's what we never get back. We never get back that camaraderie and stuff like that, that's our identity.
And Randy, you went through a rough time after the game, right? With painkillers and
right.
And addiction and all of those sorts of things. And I also read that you struggled, to think about the pressure of, while you were playing the game, the pressure about being a second-round pick and everything you had to do to stay on the field, and pressure to support your family, and fearing that someone was going to take your position at any time. Talk about all of those things.
Well, and my addiction started when I played for the Bucs. The older guys taught me one thing that you do is you do whatever you have to do to stay out on the field. And when you talk about pressure to stay on the field, well, that's pressure that we all feel in our jobs, because if we're not out on the field, somebody else is going to be in your position. So you do what you have to do. And, I never looked at it like it was an addiction. I looked at it like it was a necessary evil of the job to stay out there. So I would throw handfuls of painkillers down, and I would get out there and I would stay in my job. I would stay on the practice field. I would stay in the game. I did what I had to do to do that. And, I had so many enablers back then. I had team coaches, team trainers, teammates. I had fans. And all I had to do was play good on Sunday, and it would last a whole nother week, the addiction would. And what I never thought that was developing into a full-blown addiction, I never thought that I would take that into my private life. And then when I did retire, when Sam did slap me on the shoulder and say that we won't be needing your services anymore, I took that addiction into my private life. And the injuries were just getting worse the older I got. The pain pill addiction was just getting worse the older that I got. The tolerance was building up. So it was more. And, this went on for another 20 years. But it was a lot of the things that I just talked about also. It wasn't just about the chronic pain. It was about who was Randy Grimes and what was his identity now, and what was his contribution going to be, and just trying to figure out who I was. And the addiction was raging out of control. It didn't matter how many jobs I lost, or relationships I went through, or cars I lost, or money that I went through. I could not stop doing what I was doing. I could not stop taking the pills. And it was only 8 years ago, September 22nd of 2009, that there was just enough people left in my life to get me to a facility. And it was through the people at Player Care Foundation, Dana Lehan, that got me to the place that I'm at now. And of course, I've just reinvented myself here, and I get to give back to the guys that I played with and against now for the last 8 years. And, it's been a real opportunity to heal and heal a lot of the relationships that I damaged during that course of that addiction. And, I'm just thankful for where I am right now. It's almost like all those years of football was just preparing me for what I do now, because what I do now is life and death. There's other guys out there that are struggling just like I did for all those years, because, we have that warrior mentality where we suffer in silence. We don't tell anybody our feelings or that we're hurting, and we just self-medicate. And that's where we get in trouble, because we don't have any off switches. We just don't know who to ask for help or how to ask for help. And that's what I do now. And I get to work with and help the guys that I played with and guys that I played against.
So expand on that, for the last couple minutes we have with you, Randy, about what you're doing now. Like I say, we hear an awful lot of these, similar stories. We've had former Bucs, Keith McCants has been on the show and talked about,
right,
a very similar situation that, that he has gone through in his life, during the game and after. But talk about what you're doing now. You sort of alluded to it, but let our listeners know, and any of the other former players that might be tuning in tonight, about the great things you're doing.
Well, I worked for a facility called Behavioral Health at the Palm Beaches, and after I went through treatment, I started a program down here for retired guys. And it initially started as I'd had a good friend of mine, Tom McHale, pass away right before I came into treatment, and so many other people were starting to kind of speak up about what they were going through right when I came into treatment. So I knew that as soon as I took care of myself, and I had to do that first before I could help anybody else. But as soon as I took care of myself, it was like the following year. And believe me, guys, when I got sober down here in West Palm Beach, they couldn't get rid of me. I was desperate to do whatever it took to stay that way. I would come back. When I left treatment, I would come back on campus, even though I wasn't a client anymore, but I would come back on campus and just pick up cigarette butts, anything I could do just to stay around my safe place and those people who would see my eyes and hear my voice every day, stay accountable to somebody. And I did that for another year, and I started this program down here for retired guys, for guys that I'd played with and against. And, that was 7.5 years ago, or 7 years ago. And since then, we've been able to help hundreds of former NFL players, hundreds of former Major League Baseball guys. We've got a great thing going here. We know how to work with athletes. We know what they're going through. My clinicians down here and the doctors and the psychiatrists and everybody is plugged into what these guys are going through. And, it's just my opportunity to give back to these guys. And I don't just work with athletes. I mean, I work with everybody. I've been doing interventions for over 7 years. And, I travel the country dragging people back. But, I get to see the miracle happen. I get to go into houses and I get to see the grandmother with the missing jewelry who's sobbing uncontrollably. I get to see the empty shelf that used to have a TV on it, but it got pawned. I get to see the wrecked car in the driveway. But then I get to meet the addict or the alcoholic on their turf. I get to see the pain and destruction that they've caused. I get to take them back to treatment, and I get to see the miracle happen 30 days later. And, it's a beautiful thing. And that's what I mean about it. It's almost like football was preparing me for what I do now, because a lot of the things that I learned in football, I get to apply now, and it's opened so many doors for me. So I'm grateful for that part of my journey, but I'm most grateful for this part of my journey. And you know what? I played against some big, bad, mean, badass guys, but nothing was harder than getting sober and staying sober. And, it's my greatest accomplishment ever, and it's also my most rewarding accomplishment.
Wow. Good for you. And all the great things that you're doing, Randy, now to help your peers. And it's amazing work, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. For the folks that are listening that might need help, whether they're former players or just people in general, tell them how they can, find you, follow you, get more information, and get the help they need.
Well, of course, you can find me at my Facebook page, Randy Grimes. You can find me at Athletes in Recovery Facebook page. You can find me at Behavioral Health of the Palm Beaches website, and that's bhpalmbeach.com. And, there is hope, and we can help. That's all I can say. And also, I always want to speak to families, because I believe that when families get well, addicts and alcoholics get well. And those are the people that I want to help through this process and help them to learn the boundaries. And I want them to get their lives back, because once they get their lives back, then we as addicts and alcoholics get well.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come on and tell your story and be a part of the show. I hope you'll come back. There's so much more we'd like to get into with you and just don't have time tonight. I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime, because, what you're doing is so vitally important. And again, partnering with the NFL Alumni Association and talking to so many peers, I think it's just fantastic, because so many guys are suffering the way you did.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity, guys. Anytime.
Appreciate it.
Take care, Randy. We'll catch up again soon. All the best to you and your family in between now and then.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Good night.
Take care, Randy. That is former Bucs center Randy Grimes, and Bob, to read through his story and to see the things, that he was dealing with, and, the self-medicating piece, and the fact that he was taking so many pills at some point. I think a nurse told him that, if it wasn't for how great a shape Randy was in, the amount of pills he was taking would have killed anybody else. So then to come back from all of that and now to be helping his peers deal with that, get through it, and that sort of thing. And like you said, traveling the country and bringing guys back, it's fantastic work.
Yeah, it's quite the story, his career, Chris. When you talk about very good players who played on bad teams, that was him in a nutshell. I mean, he was considered a very, very good center. But if you look at those teams, Chris, in the 80s, they just were awful. I mean, Tampa Bay had no success and throughout his career. And again, you find yourself in your early 30s trying to look at a different lifestyle, and you're banged up beyond belief. It's something that none of us can put ourselves into. But I think of him, I think of Tony Collins, Chris. The things that they've done off the field don't even compare as far as when it comes to being totally successful and in tune with their what they really want to do with their life. It's just amazing that they've done so much off the field that trumps anything success that they've had on the field. And those two guys are just pretty much in the same boat. They're doing a lot to help people, and they would have it no other way.
Yeah, and to your point, Bob, and you've said it many times on the show, right? With guys like that we've had, like Randy and Tony and Tim Worley and EJ Jr. and the list goes on and on. The work that they're doing after their playing careers is 100 times more important than the things that they did on the field. And you've talked about that many times, and that certainly applies to Randy as well, and to Gay Culverhouse. God bless her, and we'll have Gay back on the show here before not too long, and hopefully we get the privilege of having Randy back on, like I say, again real soon as well.
Great.